go to the question. So I have a question to Mr. Roy. With government mission of 5 million tons GH2 by 2030, we will be needing about 60 to 80 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. How is India prepared to manufacture the electrolyzers of around 12 gigawatt per annum? If you know.
So yeah, so I don't think we really have the answer to that. That's work in progress, including the PLI on electrolyzers, various incentives, what technologies. It's early days, they're expensive. So I think this part of it is work in progress. There is an interest, there is a very high interest the government has in manufacturing as much of it as possible. That has to be balanced with ramping up projects very quickly. So you would need to probably balance it with imports. So I would say that, we haven't really worked out all the mechanics of getting to the 5 million metric ton and matching it with the electrolyzer capacity currently needed. But there's some good work out there with some of both large organizations, L&T, there are quite a few others who are looking at manufacturing. There are several startups which are in the picture, which have got their own design patents. There's a startup called Nutrace, which has got funding from Sequoia. So I think there is some very interesting work going on in electrolyzers, which is more or less just kind of begun to ramp up this year, really.
Okay. I've seen that also some questions have already been answered in the chat, so I won't repeat them, but read out those which haven't had an answer yet. A question from Dr. Piali Das from Terry. Are there any methanol hub or valleys in Europe similar to the H2 Valley project? I'm not sure who wants to answer. Mr. Perciv?
Yeah, we have a methanol project as a part of Energy Lab 2. We are working intensely with methanol, and the project is called OptiMeOH. Methanol is a very important part of it, and the publication that compares methanol will be out probably in the next month or so. So we are working. Of course, we are working on the technical side of it. How to produce methanol directly from renewable energy and gasification.
But in general, I mean, methanol is a derivative, so you would always it's always possible to embody methanol production into a hydrogen valley, because it's just a further process step of it once you have the green hydrogen. I have here a question, which is, what are the standards from the perceived OSRI? What are the standards being followed for hydrogen refueling stations? Do they govern both vehicle receptacle and nozzle profile together?
So we have the DVGW standards in Germany. They are legally mandated to follow the whatever devices that are used in hydrogen must follow the DVGW standards. And the G262 standard is used for anything that it's for gas distribution. And we also have a liaison team that works with ISO and other international standardization bodies. So whatever we in our testing divisions is done is also, somehow adapted in the international standards. Regarding the specific questions, no, I have to look at the standards themselves, what is covered, what is not, but it should be covered. I'll probably, if you give me some time, I'll get back on this.
Okay, thank you. A question to Sybil. How are the ports prepared as loading facilities? Are they tight, or are they new capacities? And how are you, let's say, planning your port facilities in tandem with the global demand? You're on mute. You have to mute, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have a little bit of challenge in Hamburg that we are quite a city port, so surrounded by residential areas. But this point of loading, this is actually quite a big topic, and what is currently being prepared is that or the city of Hamburg, of course, just reviewed their port development plan in the last couple of weeks and months, and in the new version of the harbor development plan, there's specific spaces foreseen to create a sustainable energy port. And I think the next steps will be by Hamburg Port Authority together with the authorities to see what this means in practice. I cannot really tell you a lot about it, but currently because there will be some announcement in a couple of weeks' time on the concrete profile of this sustainable energy port. So yeah, so just if you come back in a couple of weeks back to me, I can give you some more details on that, on what is planned there. But this will also include, I think, some planning for loading. And then, in addition, I mentioned our investigations for the terminals, where we want to be open for ammonia, with a perspective for LHSC and other parts as well.
Exactly, and that's the challenge, how to be able to be prepared for different types of derivatives. One of the biggest challenges for ports. I have here a question, which is probably none of us can answer without a crystal ball, which is, what is the price of green hydrogen in the long term? So does anybody have, so I don't know, I don't even have a crystal ball with me. So Percy, are you willing to make a venture? Okay.
So what we did was we had, I mean, this is a very important part in my PhD thesis. How will the price of hydrogen evolve? So what we did was we took all the studies till 2050 that shows the evolution of technologies. We predicted the capex reduction for electrolyzers for all the individual parts in the hydrogen valley, and then we combine the cost predictions with the simulation results, and then we have a very reasonable prediction for hydrogen, but it is dependent on the valley. For example, if we have a huge very cheap solar electricity production, then the hydrogen price will also be very cheap. And if that region has it is all dependent on the electricity price that that powers everything. And we have the publication will come very shortly. What will be the evolution of hydrogen price till 2050? We have it for every year, and it is reasonably accurate.
It is very Prasanto, yes, of course.
Yeah, just a quick one that I mean, broadly in discussions here, we are all working with a 2030 target of somewhere in the $2 to $1.50 range, and one of our largest members, Reliance, is working on a $1 per kilogram for green hydrogen target. So, and they've been pretty good with their other price targeting. So, it take any range from 2 to 1 there.
And I think we will have a first indication on the price once the results of the first auction of H2 Global will be evaluated. This is in a couple of weeks' time, still this year, I expect. And I think this will give a first indication on what market price will be valid, at least in the short term for hydrogen, not in the long term, maybe.
Exactly. It's a Prasithya.
I have one more insight here. So hydrogen can be used in different markets, and there was a study comparing what is the most economical way of pricing hydrogen. So there is a huge hydrogen hub in Germany called Energy Park Mainz. You can Google it. The publication is online, and they found out that if hydrogen is used for the control market, for example, if there is a grid fluctuation, and then instead of wasting energy, you produce hydrogen with it. In that case, it is extremely economical. It can be produced in as less as $0.50. So they have a publication for that. You can simply search it in Google, Energy Park Mainz, and then hydrogen optimal price or something.
Yes, the challenge with using that, before you simply waste the electricity, of course, it's not easy to use it. The challenge is that you probably, I don't know the calculations. I would suspect it only looks at the capex, at the opex, but not at the capex. So the challenge that if you buy an electrolyzer, then it's not utilized for a great part of time. There will be many changes. So dear panelists, we have now 12 o'clock. So we have lots of questions. So the question is, how much willing, another 10 minutes? Is that fair? Are you willing to be around for another 10 minutes? Okay, let's see how much more we can do. Okay. An interesting question. How do we get a mix of hydrogen production technologies to have high turn down and quick ramp up for load balancing. So this is perceived. This, I'm sure this is for you because you have your energy modeling, systems modeling optimization.
We have all the electrolyzers on campus. We have the SOECs, we have the PEMs and the alkalines. The alkaline and PEMs can be ramped up very quickly. We can ramp them up. For example, when a cloud comes and the solar panels produce, we can ramp them up very quickly. It is seconds. The SOECs are high temperature. We need steam for that, so that cannot be ramped up very easily. And if we have a mix of all of them, it's very challenging to determine what can be ramped up and what cannot be ramped up. But a rule of thumb is that whenever you have PEMs and alkalines in the system, they can be ramped up very fast. And how fast should they be ramped up? It should be ramped up as fast as surplus electricity is being produced. So you cannot waste surplus electricity. So there is a prediction model that says in the next hour, in between these and these times, weather prediction models will give so much of surplus electricity, and we can set the electrolyzers to ramp up very quickly within a 10-second framework to capture that surplus of electricity and not let it go wasted. And PEMs and alkalines can do that, but the problem is they have very low efficiency in comparison to SOEC. So it's actually a trick managing all these things together.
It is, because the SOECs, however, they need the high temperature to run, so then it works for specific locations. It's a very location. Question, so this, if we move away from technologies, who usually brings all members to the Hydrogen Valley together? So we agree, like technology is one part, but the organizational development is the second thing. Who's the best person to be the glue?
Mm-hmm.
So I just do a quick one, and then maybe Sybil or somebody would join. So essentially, you create. There are anchors. So there would be large. So your starting point would be large off-takers or potential off-takers. Okay. So you create the framework. You create. You maybe assist in on the storage side, etc. But then you bring in. So it's not a single entity which actually does that. Now if it's in a smaller kind of thing, like the example I gave you of a particular Tata Steel location in Gopalpur where somebody's setting up a green hydrogen plant, okay, that's where it's a MOU between basically two entities out there. Okay, if it's a government sort of sponsored or supported hub, okay, the government's playing the basic role of encouraging and working with. There are basic MOUs, but it's not a single entity that's actually tasked with bringing all of them in. But usually there is, your starting point is a major anchor consumer or off-taker.
Any other views? Yes, I agree. Anchor is a good idea. Sybil?
Well, in Hamburg we have I would partly agree. I mean, it depends on how much in depth you want to bring partners together. Of course, if it's about real B2B partnerships, then it's difficult to have a single entity. But in our region in Hamburg, we have really the approach that us as the renewable energy cluster, we are a central role on organizing this whole hydrogen valley. So this is why we offer all these activities where we very much bottom up on demand by our partners, be it producers, infrastructure providers, or the off-takers for hydrogen, can come to us and say, I would like to work on that topics. I'm looking for partners. Can you organize an activity? So this is very much our role, which of course we do in very close cooperation with the regional ministry, who have also a department on hydrogen, on implementing their hydrogen strategy for Hamburg. But I would say for Hamburg, our renewable energy cluster is the central players on organizing this network.
And then probably, I think this is the bottom line, what Praseeth always said, it really depends on your location. And like if you're just starting an anchor, we have a big anchor, it makes sense, but Hamburg has so much potential, you probably do need a nodal agency just to put everything together. So it depends. I have this very philosophical question where probably everybody would like to opine. It is, can EV and hydrogen technologies exist side by side, or will it be at the expense of one another in the market?
That's EV, electric vehicles.
Electrical vehicles and hydrogen.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick one there. Basically, we are, as far as hydrogen for, especially for heavy transport, what we're looking at is FCEV. So there's no question that the basic drivetrain, the powertrain is electric. Okay, because while there are also experiments with ICE based engines being converted to hydrogen, I don't think long term anyone really expect or has hope for there. Out here, we're not seeing a lot of potential in a lot of small, passenger cars and two-wheelers, that kind of transport. That's probably more efficiently done with pure EV. And we've seen, I think, also in Europe and Germany and so on, that trains also, they figured out that it's actually the battery powered electric is turning up more efficient than the hydrogen. But where in heavy transport, in trucks and return to base trucking, in large buses, etc., it's FCEV. So if it's hydrogen, it adds on to the electric and not either on.
Any other views? Proceed. Sorry, then
So,
Sybil. Sorry, ladies last this time, but not forgotten.
So we have two concepts here. One is the share of personal and load vehicles. So that was already said in high load vehicles like trucks and everything, we need hydrogen. So there's no question of coexistence. It's a separate system. But there's also something that we in our work consider, and it's called long-term storage. For example, if we take the whole of summer in Germany and all the solar plants produce very cheap electricity and we are able to produce very cheap hydrogen, the entire fuel cost would be cheaper. And if the potential for that increases in areas, then the fuel cost would be cheaper and hydrogen engines would be produced by the load carrying vehicles. And it's very easy to, scale down an engine. It's the same engine, basically, only the capacity is lesser. So in that case, if the long-term storage happens and hydrogen is produced, probably yes. But and also personal vehicles are only very small percentage of the whole, whole.
Okay. So we have at least unanimity on the personal view. But Cyril, Sybil, apologies.
Yeah, okay. I of course I agree totally with what was said before. I just would like also to add with a concrete example. I mentioned the Hamburg Harbor Logistics Agency before with the Clean Port Logistics project, and they say, for example, they cannot use electric vehicles on the site because their transport vehicles have to run 24 hours, 7 days per week. So there is no option for them to go on electric vehicles for the really heavy vehicles they're using on that. So for them, clearly fuels hydrogen is the option of the day. So it depends. I mean, I think you cannot say one or the other, but that was as the colleagues mentioned before.
Okay, so it's an interesting debate to get into the believers, non-believers. It's still a question of belief. I would personally add on to what Prasanto said is also that even buses, I've found out that buses tend to be in Europe 2.5 times as expensive as EVs, and so I think, like as Sybil said, really in the heavy vehicles, heavy duty, I think they might have an application. It's written at 10 past 12. I have tons of questions still left. Unfortunately, we got halfway through, so a huge amount of interest. But I feel guilty to continue. It really depends on you. Another 5 minutes, and then we close it, or okay, last 5 minutes, and we'll make it a quick run. Okay, question for Dr. Roy. So probably everybody gets a question, and then we have 1-sentence answers. What is the energy efficiency for hydrogen electrolyzers in the next 10 years? Another crystal ball question. What is the energy efficiency for hydrogen electrolyzers in the next 10 years?
Sorry, who was that for?
That is for Dr. Roy. It could be anybody in the end.
I think Prasid is best placed to answer that, probably.
Yeah.
I don't have a view on that.
The efficiency is defined as output to input. So if your output is only hydrogen, then PEMs and alkalines have around 55 to 65% practical efficiency. In our SOEC plants, we have around 83% efficiency. And if the temperature goes on higher to around 800 degrees Celsius, we can go up to 86%. There was a breakthrough publication in Nature. They achieved 92 in Australia, Wollongong. They use new kind of electrolysis called capillary. So SOEC is 80 to 90, PEMs and alkalines around 65%. That's what our experience shows.
I'm backing up on that one. Quickly, the green ammonia usage in fertilizer industry is being seriously discussed. The rate of gray ammonia is about $400 per ton, whereas reports state that green ammonia with green hydrogen will cost about $1,000 per ton. This will increase the subsidy burden for the government of India or increase food cost. Pilot projects seem reality, but large-scale plans seem far-fetched. Any comments from the panel? Green ammonia, green fertilizer?
So just a quick one on that. But the price varies a lot, and last year it's actually gone up because of imports, the Ukraine, issues. It crossed $1,100 or $1,200 from that 400. So it's been really, really variable. Second is, as far as India is concerned, we import, whether it's at 400 or at 1,100. There's a fair bit of imports of that ammonia. So there is also the foreign exchange outflow, etc. So it's not just a straight green versus the landed cost of that imported ammonia. So you got to look at that right now. Yes, you've got to look at the subsidy part. We have about ₹1 trillion, about 1 lakh crore rupees of fertilizer subsidy alone. But we believe that can be, looked at in terms of replacing some of the imported ammonia with green ammonia here. And that is a complex calculation. It's not straightforward, this versus that. But we believe that's something that we're working on and figuring that piece out.
Okay. Trying to find one last question for everybody. And I agree, I know from experience ammonia today is more like $650 per ton. So 400 is very cheap. And then the cost, and then as Prasid said, depends if you're producing in Rajasthan with fantastic sun or you're producing in somewhere else with no sun. It varies greatly. It's so hard to say.
Very important. We also need water. We also need water.
Yes.
Well, cost of water can be, we need very pure water. It should be purer than the mineral water that we buy on the stand to do electrolysis. That is can be a big cost.
Okay. Before I think there's so many questions we're not going to get through, many are very detailed. Perhaps just then a couple of everybody gets a last closing, let's say for hydrogen valleys, to get back onto hydrogen valleys. What is the main thing that you would like the audience to go home with and to remember? And to go, Cyril, can I put you? Do you want to go first to make sure I then make ladies first this time?
Okay. Yes. I think for a really well-functioning hydrogen valley, the most important is organized knowledge exchange, networking, because it's astonishing that even in a small place like Hamburg, when we started our network, we were astonished to see how little different stakeholders along the supply chain knew from each other, from projects, etc. So I think this is the most crucial point for the success of a hydrogen valley, connect people and projects.
Networking. So that's a big takeaway. Thank you. Proceed. Do you want to next?
I mean, my take is that hydrogen valleys will be an ecosystem. So many people have to come together. Energy production companies, distribution companies, government, policymakers, universities. They all have to come together, and then they have to do this together, exchange information, plan projects, etc. together. One person doing something and expecting the other to adapt will not work. We have to, sit on a table, put all the stakeholders together, and it is an ecosystem. And this ecosystem will be different in different parts of the country.
Thank you. So that's actually that's the scaling up, so going from networking now to collaboration and ecosystems. Prasanto, your last words.
Hydrogen is, we believe, very crucial to the development of the ecosystem, and that conversation has to be done looking at domestic offtake. So while continuing with the direction of exports, we strongly believe the domestic offtake. And while I think, I agree with Prasad Chapekar's initial comments that it's a very complex area, there are a lot of questions. The triggers are fairly simple in our mind. The triggers are domestic offtake, and that domestic offtake, if there's 6 million metric tons of gray hydrogen sitting out there being consumed, the answer really lies there. A mandate of 5% in that will completely change the picture.